Welcome to Dark Horizon Creations. I'm Mike. This time I'm going to be discussing Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins. Now, if you hadn't already, please follow, like, and subscribe to my social media accounts on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get a notification of when I post new content. Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins is the third entry into the G.I. Joe live-action film franchise and is intended to be a reboot of the same. It stars Mr. Henry Golding as Snake Eyes and Mr. Andrew Koji as Tommy Arashikagi, Storm Shadow. It's no secret that this movie underperformed at the box office, and critics haven't been kind in their review of the movie as well. But are they justified in their opinion? That's what I want to talk about here today. Now, I also want to say up front there will be spoilers in this video, just to make you guys aware. From day one, I was opposed to this movie. I didn't like the fact that they rewrote the origin story of Snake Eyes, and changed him from a Caucasian American male serving his country to an Asian American civilian. I just couldn't grasp that. I thought that that was a disservice to the original comics and storyline. I just didn't agree with it. But as time went on and I began to learn more about the movie, and when I saw the first scenes from this movie, I was awestruck. I really was. And I began to understand what they did and why they did it. So I want to provide you guys some facts about Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. I want to share with you their original origin story to give you information to compare and contrast with what you see on screen. And I also want to talk about some of the creative decisions that were made by the director and the writers in taking the movie in the direction that they did, and how all of that affects the outcome of this movie. To begin with, Snake Eyes had his first appearance in G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue number 1. That was released in June of 1982. And these comics were written originally by Mr. Larry Hama, who worked at Marvel. He was the only person, who would take this project on, and he created all the backstory for these original characters. So when we meet Snake Eyes, he's a Caucasian American male. He's serving in the U.S. Army as part of the 101st Air Assault Division. And he, along with his friends Tommy Arashikagi and Alonzo Wilkinson, deployed to Vietnam, where all three of them volunteer for Alert Team. Now, if you don't know what Alert Team is, that's an acronym, LRRP. It stands for Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol. And these were an all-volunteer unit, but you also had to go through a selection process to join the Alert Teams. They weren't special forces, but many of the members of the Alerts went on to volunteer for and join special operations units afterwards. The Alerts were responsible for going behind enemy lines for days or, even a week or more at the time, and conduct intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance on the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. So here you have Tommy and Alonzo and Snake Eyes, and they're on a mission. They come under heavy contact. The helicopter comes in to extract them. It gets hit. The jet fuel is ignited in the explosion. It burns Snake Eyes in the face. It badly disfigures him, and it burns his vocal cords so that he cannot speak anymore. And he's rotated back to the United States. Upon arriving back stateside, he learns that his family has been killed in an automobile accident. And the individual who kills his family is a drunk driver named Dan. Dan is the older brother of the man who we know as Cobra Commander. At that time, that person is a civilian. He's a family man. He's married. He's got a young baby named Billy. And he's a used car salesman of all things. He becomes enraged that Dan is killed in this wreck and blames the family, who is actually the victim. And during this time, Snake Eyes is just overwhelmed, because he, discharged from the U.S. military. He's a wounded veteran. He's lost his family. He's lost his, their home. He has no future, nothing to look forward to. And he goes up into the mountains, into seclusion, to process everything that's happened to him. Tommy returns stateside and tracks him down, and he invites Snake Eyes to travel with him back to Japan to train with his family, the Arashikagi. and to become a ninja. What happens is the individual, again, who becomes Cobra Commander learns that that family killed in the wreck has a surviving son. And the identity is never revealed. We don't know Snake Eyes' real name or even where this takes place in the U.S. So he hires a mercenary who is Firefly. Firefly is a former member of the G.I.Joe team. He is now working as an assassin and mercenary. So Firefly tracks Snake Eyes down to Japan, where he's training with the Arashikagi under the Hard Master, Tommy's uncle. And he quickly learns that he's no match for Snake Eyes. And he reports back to, again, the individual that will be Cobra Commander and tells him that he can't do the job, but he knows an assassin who can, and it's an individual named Zartan. Zartan travels to Japan, and in the midst of all of this, while Snake Eyes is training under the Hard Master sees Snake Eyes' heart, that it's pure. And Tommy is the heir to the Arashikagi clan. He is set to become the heir to inherit the leadership role and lead the Arashikagi. And what happens is the Hard Master prefers Snake Eyes over Tommy, so it creates a interpersonal conflict between Tommy and Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes really doesn't respond to the jealousy of Tommy and his anger toward the Hard Master. He just continues to train and do what the Hard Master tells him to do. So Zartan travels to Japan. He infiltrates the Arashikagi compound, and he steals one of Tommy's arrows out of his quiver. And he's going to use it to assassinate Snake Eyes and frame Tommy for the murder. What ends up happening is, as he fires the arrow, it misses Snake Eyes and hits the Hard Master instead, killing him. So when Tommy and Snake Eyes and everyone see that arrow, they know that it belongs to Tommy. Tommy flees for his life, determined to find out who killed his uncle and avenge his death. And at the same time, he's dealing with all these feelings towards Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes, at some point, returns to the United States. He re-enlists in the Army, volunteers for Special Forces, goes through selection for U.S. Army Special Forces, becomes a Green Beret. At some point during his service in the Special Forces groups, he volunteers for selection for a U.S. Army Special Missions Unit. And he goes through selection, he completes it, goes through the operator training course, completes that, becomes a member of the Special Missions Unit, either during his tenure in that unit or after he's selected to join the G.I.Joe team. So I want to point that out, because if you're watching this and you're prior service or active duty, you know exactly what I'm referring to and what units I'm talking about. That's actually part of this character's backstory. So the G.I. Joe is a special missions unit, but it's not identical to this other unit that I'm referring to. I think that's really cool that they put that in there. And G.I. Joe is loosely based, off of this real world unit. So that's how these two characters get to where they are. Now let's compare that to Snake Eyes' G.I. Joe origins. You've got Snake Eyes as a child. He sees his father murdered. He grows up angry, determined to avenge his father's death. He trains in the martial arts. We see him, in all these underground fights and things like that. And he's just taking out his anger and frustration on all of his opponents. And he comes into employment with Kenta. Kenta offers him an opportunity to avenge his father's death by revealing who his murderer is, if he will infiltrate the Arashikagi and steal the Jewel of the Sun. He agrees to do that. And in this process, this whole attempt on Tommy's life set up by Kenta is actually just a setup to, get Snake Eyes into the Arashikagi clan. So he's dealing with an interpersonal conflict all the way through this movie. And initially he sets out, I think, to really betray them, but as he begins to train, his heart changes. And that's why during the third challenge, when he first encounters the snakes in the pit, they're going to kill him because they sense that his heart isn't pure. Later at the end of the battle, when he encounters them again, they sense that his heart is pure, and of course they, devour Kenta. But a lot of the criticism about this movie has come from the Jewel of the Sun and the large snakes. And I want to take just a minute and talk about those two aspects. First, let's talk about the Jewel of the Sun. Here we have this jewel that has tremendous ability to somehow harness energy and be used as a weapon. And there's been a lot of critics about that, but let me point you back to the G.I. Joe cartoon series. Does anyone remember the device called the Weather Dominator that was made up of multiple components, including a large jewel that once combined allowed Destro to manipulate the weather on Earth? Let's talk about the three large snakes. Some people have said that's unrealistic. No, it isn't, and I'm going to tell you why. First and foremost, again, let's go back to G.I. Joe, the animated cartoon. The animated movie, does anyone remember Cobra La and what they were? Does anyone remember seeing a giant snake in that cartoon? Okay, that was way out there. I don't count that as being canon within G.I. Joe, but it is what it is. So what we're seeing in this movie is not something that we haven't seen before. It's really a modern take on it. There's nothing fantastical about what we see in this movie. It's entirely plausible. One of the things that I want to say is this, in Japanese culture and history where ninja are concerned, these were families and villages up in the mountains. Some of them were former samurai who began to train in what originally was Chinese martial arts, and they incorporated elements of things like Aikido and things like that into it. And they began to modify, farm implements to use as weapons, just as they had in Okinawa with traditional karate. And you see the ninja who are opposed to the rule of certain shogun. And their enemy, of course, is primarily whatever shogun that they're opposed to, as well as their army of samurai. Samurai were the loyal protectors of these warlords and the government of Japan. They were their bodyguards. They also served to enforce the law throughout the different prefectures. So the ninja began to train in these arts. They began to develop what we would call asymmetric warfare. And that's what they engaged in. They were really the special operations of their time, if I can word it that way. They would infiltrate, the compounds of the leadership that they were going after. They would gain intelligence, and the way they would do that is they would disguise themselves as farmers and peasants who would become workers or servants. There were even female ninja who operated as lovers for some of these individuals, and they did that to get close to the person in order to kill them. And that's what they were. They were assassins, and all of the tactics and techniques that they employed were done so to be able to carry out these operations. And they could kill one person and instantly change the balance of power in Japan in one night. And of course, they faced an numerically superior enemy. And they had to use tactics and techniques that would allow them to get close to their target, engage that target, take it out, and then fade away without having to engage a large number of enemy. There was a lot of things that they employed, tactics and techniques and procedures, but a lot of the training that they went through involved tests. You could not progress and become a ninja without passing these tests. And we see that in the movie. Now, whether the actual clans of ninja throughout Japanese history employed identical tests as we see in the film, we don't know. Because a lot of the history of the ninja is conjecture. There are some historical records, but not many. So it's not entirely implausible to, imagine them having, a pit with 3 large snakes in it, and that's part of your trial. Look at countries like India, where you see the snake charmers, and there's 18, 20-foot cobras that they charm, while they're playing this musical instrument. And many people in the West think it's the sound of the instrument that's charming the snake. It's not. And what's happening is he's tapping his foot on the ground, and the snake senses that vibration. He's curious and he's drawn to it. And he sees that the individual is non-threatening. Those are just some of the things that I want to point out, because as I began to think about all this, I was like, every single preconceived idea I had about this movie was just kind of, torn down, as I began to do research and look at things. And seeing the scenes on the screen, I was, particularly the fight scenes, I was just awestruck. I really was. The level of coordination, between the actors, the training, skills involved in the sword fights particularly, was tremendous. It really was. So the other aspect I want to talk about is the fact that people have criticized the Baroness and Scarlet being included in this movie. This is an origin movie about Snake Eyes, but it's also a G.I. Joe film. So, of course, there has to be something within the plot of the story to bring Cobra in. And, of course, Kenta is, working for Cobra, smuggling weapons and things like that. And he sees the jewels, the sun, and Cobra does as well. They want it to turn into a weapon. And I don't know if you guys can see the G.I. Joe Classified series Baroness with Coil motorcycle. She's got this large cobra snake that she grips with her arm. That's an energy weapon. It's got a beam of energy projecting out of its mouth. What do you think the jewel of the sun is? Same thing. So Cobra's after this. Of course they are. Anything that would give them an upper hand to hold the world hostage underneath their power, they're going to go after it. There's a lot of potential in the future for a sequel between Scarlet and the Baroness, because there's so much conflict there with them as well, their past history, growing up, knowing each other. The Baroness, I think, is a woman who, despite being extremely intelligent and manipulative and seductive, is also very broken. I see her as someone that's carrying around a lot of baggage, and after the deed is done, she has a lot of time to consider her past and the decisions that she's made. I see her as a character with great potential to capitulate and turn herself into G.I. Joe and become a member of the team. Scarlet, again, she's the counterintelligence officer for G.I. Joe. She always has been. That's always been her primary MOS, 35 Lima. Lady J, Cover Girl, all those characters have counterintelligence as either their primary or secondary MOS. Having Scarlet come in there's this long history in the comic books of Scarlet and Snake Eyes not only being friends, but being romantically involved. And it's only natural to introduce her as a character to kind of tie them in together and set things up for a sequel. So, they're completely justified in the creative decisions that they made throughout this movie. And here we have conflict between Tommy and Snake Eyes, and that sets things up. Tommy has lost his birthright. He has sinned against his family and against the Arashikagi, and done what he was not supposed to do, what he vowed not to do. And if you understand Japanese culture and history, the samurai were generally considered the honorable class of people, if you will. They lived by Bushido, a code of honor. The ninja did not. They were considered dishonorable because they would use anything and any means that they needed to accomplish their end goal. In this movie, the Arashikagi are presented slightly different. They are ninja, but there is some sort of code of honor within this family that provides order and structure. And in so doing, there are rules to abide by. And Tommy has just broken that and lost his birthright. So there's still a story there as well. What happens to the Arashikagi? Because they live on. And they have worked to keep peace in Japan and around the world for 600 years. They're not just going to go away and disappear. That's got to stay with with the future story in some aspect or regard. You know, does Snake Eyes take over and become the leader of the Arashikagi? Does he maintain his ties with the family? What happens there? That's just setting up for a sequel. So all the creative decisions in this movie, in my opinion, are much, much better than what we saw in Rise of Cobra and Retaliation. Rise of Cobra, I'm a big fan of. Good movie, poor creative decisions, rushed production, bad casting choices. And if Retaliation had continued with some of the plots that we saw within, you know, the Rise of Cobra, brought back some of the characters like Destro, you know, even if they had recast Duke, since Channing Tatum was opposed to continuing the role, I think Retaliation would have garnered more money at the box office. There's lessons to be learned from both of those films, and I think that they have done that with Snake Eyes. I really do. They have set the franchise up for success, not failure. And it's a reboot. You know, we're starting over. And one of the things to keep in mind is that this isn't, we have to create G.I. Joe and start. No, G.I. Joe has existed for decades, as has Cobra. So they've been working behind the scenes, and at some point there's going to be an unveiling with Cobra, you know, their grand scheme to take over the world. We haven't gotten there yet in that storyline, and there's no reason to rush to that point either, even in a sequel. So I think this is something that can keep, you know, fans coming back for more, because you're dying to know what happens next. It presents all sorts of opportunities to continue the franchise in other media, like tie-in books and comics and things like that, video games, possibly. Anything that will help continue the story until the next movie. I really like the movie. I really do. I think all the actors did a phenomenal job. You know, and I don't think that the negative criticism that we've heard about the movie is justified. So guys, that's my take on Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins. I hope you guys have enjoyed the review. Stay tuned. There's more to come.